Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with a Vet. My name is Carol Lee. Before I get too involved in my guest who's waiting backstage, I wanted to give a huge shout out to Will Simmons with SimmonsLawVets.com. He is the managing attorney of that business, and he was also a guest on the channel not long ago, so you can go back through and look up William Simmons, and he has sent some items for giveaway. So I'm super excited for that. So when we hit our next milestone, we are going to be giving these away. So we have 7 of these koozies, getting vets the benefits they deserve, as well as we have several, and you can see there's several behind me as well, of these Yeti can coolers. So I'm super excited about that. On the back, we have the logo there. And so just really excited. And thank you so much, Will, if you're watching. Really appreciate that. So for everybody who does watch this, please be sure to go out to the channel, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification button so that you don't miss any of our wonderful conversations that we have with our veterans. So that being said, without further ado, please help me welcome Lorenzo. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, Carolee.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's an honor to have you. So we briefly were talking just before the show. So your weather is going to get down into the 20s, which is unusual for the area you're at. Are you
Very
all
true.
prepared for that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Preparing for this seems like nothing compared to when you have a hurricane threatening you around this area.
I know. I don't know how y'all do it over there. Tornadoes are bad enough, and then you get the hurricanes. It's like, aye. So, excuse me. I'd like to start off by asking my guests to tell me a little bit about who you were as a child.
Yeah, that goes back a little while. So I'm the product of an American soldier who met the pretty Italian girl at the beach while he was stationed in Italy. Um,
Oh,
so my mother is now an American citizen, but she was Italian. My father was an American soldier. And at that time, my father was in the Army. So when I was conceived, now this is hearsay, but it's the way the story goes. My mother asked my father to get out of the military because he had just gotten back from Vietnam and she didn't want him going back to Vietnam and possibly be a single parent.
mm-hmm.
So he agreed. He got out, and as the story goes, about 6 months later, my mother started missing the benefits from the military. So she said, "You need to go back in the military." But
Ah.
so he was an 8-year veteran Army at that point, and he decided to go in the Air Force to reduce the chances of him going to Vietnam again. He did another 18 years. So that's my
Wow.
father. That's my mother. I grew up, in Italy for the first 10 years of my life. I lived in Germany 2.5 years, and then Spain 3.5 years. Now, when I left Italy, I moved in with my father, who was the active duty soldier, airman at the time. So I did the DODDS schools, overseas Department of Defense schools,
Mm-hmm.
and I did those all the way up to my sophomore year. And
Were
then
were they hard?
you know what? They were no, I mean they were challenging for sure. They wanted you to learn. Back in those days, we still, if you didn't pass, you didn't pass, and you didn't go to the next grade. You had to take the same grade over again. It
Yeah.
was you either passed or you didn't, and that was it. But yeah, no, it wasn't difficult. I was a good student. I think my biggest problem when it came to school was that when I left school, I didn't bring school home with me. So I did very well on tests, on in classroom assignments, but I rarely turned in any homework. So as a result, I graduated with like a 2.67 or something like that.
I understand how that goes.
Yeah.
How difficult was it being a child of a military father in your mind?
The hardest part was, for me personally, was that my father wasn't around very much for the first 10 years of my life. He was, wherever he was stationed, and my mother and I stayed in Italy. And that basically translated into me being at a babysitter's house every day, pretty much for the majority of the day, which I mean, for me was great because I call her my Zia Carmen. She's with the Lord now, but she loved me like her own child, and she was a neighborhood babysitter, and she was a widow, and so all of us, all of our parents of us kids that she watched knew that, and they allowed her to babysit us, to help her out financially, but also because she was a mother to all of us. You know what I mean? She was. I get
Yeah.
goosebumps when I remember my Aunt Carmen. I really, and as it turns out, as because she was a widow and her son was the only child, and I'm an only child. Fabrizio and I grew up like blood brothers, and to this day, we still refer to each other as blood brothers, and we love each other that way. And you know,
That's a wonderful
yeah,
story. That's
yeah.
amazing. So, when you, I guess, what was it that made you decide you wanted to join the military, and then specifically the branch that you chose?
Well, that's a story in itself because when I was 24, I tried to join the Air Force, and I went through the whole process up until the day that I was supposed to get on the bus and go to MEPS to raise my hand and swear the oath. But when I talked to the recruiter before getting on the bus, I told him, I said, "Hey, by the way, I forgot to tell you about a minor misdemeanor, which was resisting arrest without violence when I was a teenager." And he came back at me and he said, I could have you sent to Leavenworth, blah, blah, blah. And I said, man, I haven't raised my hand yet. I haven't signed the contract. I said, so, bump you. I'm out of here. And I remember the Army recruiter coming out of his office. He goes, hey, man, I'll get you in no matter what. And I said, well, no, I wasn't ready then. So fast forward 6 years, my father, who was still alive at the time, and at this point, so now I'm in, my early 30s, um, calls me up and said, guess who I was talking to at Walmart yesterday? And I said, who? He said, the Army recruiter. And he caught me at the right moment. I went down, and within like a couple of months, I'm swearing the oath and gone to basic at the age of, when I when I swore in, I was 32. And then by the time I went by the time I actually got to AIT, I think I completed basic combat training and all that, but then I turned 33. So I was in my early 30s when I joined.
Wow. So during this time, you tell your mom what you were going to be doing?
I mean, I told her I was joining the military, and she was happy. Right up to the point I was joining the military, I was living in southern Alabama, and I was a partner in a drywall company, and all we did was subcontract out the hanging of it, and we had 3 contractors that kept us busy all year round. We made good money, you know, but I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't see that it going anywhere, and just like I said, when my father called me and said that, and yeah, once I started the process, yeah, I called my mother, let people who I cared about know that I was making this decision. Oddly enough, one of the people that respected it the most was Chief Lamar. He was the police chief of the small little Alabama town that I lived in, and um, he was real proud of me. That made me feel good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. So let's talk a little bit about what was going through your head the minute you step off that bus for basic training.
Well, when you get to, the first week is, initiation. They cut your hair, they go through all that stuff. And I had no problem with that. It seemed pretty relaxed. Um, but when they came to pick us up to get us and all our bags to start basic combat training, then the reality of it hit me in the face. I mean, those drill sergeants were in our face and yelling and noses rubbing, spit in your face, and all that stuff. Make you dump your bag out, make it fill it back up, and all that stuff. I got lucky. I got to get in the back of the truck with the bags, and I got trucked over. The rest of the people had to march across what they call the Trail of Tears. I did basic combat training at Fort Benning. As a matter of fact, I was one of the last classes to go through Fort Benning before they went co-ed and had females and males training together.
Wow. So when they're in, I mean, did they give you grief, I guess, the drill instructors about your age? You had to have been one of the older ones. Is that?
I was definitely I was the oldest, but no, they didn't actually. They
Oh,
just the opposite. They they messed with me. They broke me down and then built me back up. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm. Yep.
So like they made me platoon, platoon leader. They made me, they just gave me responsibility after responsibility after responsibility and gave me a chance to make mistakes so that they could beat me down and make me a better soldier. Um, but no, a basic combat training for me was pretty easy in the sense that I was in my 30s. I'd already had my own business, worked for plenty of different people, doing many different things, and I think, just a little bit more disciplined, and so it wasn't difficult for me to have to stand at attention for extended periods of time, or the physical aspect of it was brand new to me because up to that point, I never, except for high school, I never lifted weights, never did anything. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed. The only time I think I regretted it was that after we, marched across the Trail of Tears, and they made us do push-ups. They just really, they got all over us. And I remember we had 4 hours before we had to get up and start the next day. And I was on a top. I got lucky. I got a top bunk. And I remember looking up the ceiling and asking myself, what in the F did I get myself into? But that's the only time I questioned it. After that, I said, this is what I'm doing. And I excelled at basic combat training. As a matter of fact, I almost made Soldier Disciple. When they brought me in to ask me the questions, they really wanted me to be Soldier Disciple. But I made some facing movements with my weapon at attention and, can't do that. So I didn't get Soldier Disciple. But oddly enough, during the graduation ceremony, after they went through all of the awards, and the last person typically they call out as the Soldier Disciple, and they gave him that award. They said, we have one more person we want to recognize, and they pulled me out and they gave me a battalion coin saying, we were, honoring Private LaFountain with this coin for excellence in all aspects of basic combat training. That was probably the highlight of my military career.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
huge. That's really
Well,
huge. So, as far as funny stories go for basic training, what do you remember? Any?
oh yeah. Well, there's the typical one where you see, when they're breaking you down when you first get there, you see, the young kids crying and stuff like that. Mommy, mommy, mommy. That's always funny in an unfunny kind of way, I guess.
Right?
No, I mean, yeah, there was one. I was, again, they used to task me out to do stuff, because I was serious about it. And so they got to a point where they would let me march 2 to 3 soldiers at a time to the barber shop to get our hair cut and then back. And one time we went, I did this. I marched, it was like 3 or 4 soldiers. I don't remember. And we got to the barber shop and we were next to go in line. And a drill sergeant with about 15 of his soldiers in training came in, and he pushed us out of the line. And he went and got, so here I marched these guys back, and drill sergeant asked me, why didn't they get the haircut? And I said, well, we were next in line, and then this drill sergeant from another company did this, blah, blah, blah. He put us all in a vehicle, drove us up there, walked up in there, and he asked me who it was. And I said, well, it was that guy right there. And he got in his face and he said, don't you ever tell my soldier, blah, cut line, blah. And he made his soldiers get out of the doggone chairs so that we could get in the chair and get our haircut. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. That
Wow.
happened. Yeah, that happened. That guy was no
That's
joke.
crazy.
Yeah,
That's
I know.
awesome, actually.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the way to watch out for your troops, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great respect for that guy. I mean, he didn't have to do that,
No.
but yeah, that's what he did.
So let's ask about what was the MOS you signed up for originally?
It was 25 series then. It was 25 Foxtrot, which was a radio operator maintainer. And here's the thing. I'm glad you asked me that question, Because if you don't know that there's 250 jobs in the Army, when you go to MEPS, they'll show you a short list of MOSs that need slots filled. When they show you that short list, they don't tell you, this is what we would like for you to fill, but there's another, let's say there's 20 on there. So there's another 230 jobs you can choose. They don't do that. They put that short list in front of you. And out of that list, actually, had I known, I would have gone on infantry or artillery had I known what the Army was about before, joining.
Right.
But in my infinite wisdom, I chose to be a signal soldier because I thought that would be a good career to carry over into the civilian sector when I got done, and based on, and it is, except for the fact that I friggin' hated it. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. Yeah, you never know your equipment. By the time you learn your equipment, it's in its beginning stages of obsolescence. So then they bring in the new router, the new this, the new that, and you have to learn your equipment all the time. So me and my personality, if you give me an opportunity to get good at something, I'll be the best that I can be at it, and I'll take a lot of pride in that, and I will be the best at it. But when I can't ever know my job because I'm constantly having to learn my equipment, I hated it. I absolutely hated it. The best time I had in the military was basic combat training, AIT, and then deployment. Everything in between was crap.
So let's talk a little bit about AIT. So what was AIT like for you?
Oh, it was dangerous because they allowed me to leave the post on the weekends unless I had, weekend duty. And during the week, I could go to the bowling alley. And because I was older, the drill sergeants would let me go into the off limits part, which was the actual bar, not just the bowling area, but they would buy me drinks and we'd hang out and stuff, and all that stuff. Yeah. So it was dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. It fed into my overly active desire to have a drink. Especially then. Back then, I really had a problem with alcohol back then. I still drink now, but I control it as opposed to the other way around, where if there was booze in the house, I would have to finish it before I went to bed. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. So when you were in basic training and AIT, due to your age, did you have a lot of recruits that depended and relied on you to help them get through?
No, not at all. No, not at all. I was basically just treated as a peer. There was no, extra respect or whatever for me just because of my age. No, as a matter of fact, they if anything, they would try to make fun of me and stuff like that because of my age, but in a friendly way, in a good way,
right?
Not in a bad way. You know what I mean? But yeah.
So, okay, you go to AIT. How long was it for you?
Don't remember. I want to say 9 weeks. It may have been 11 weeks.
And once you graduate AIT, where do you go from there?
Well, they gave me 20 some odd days of leave to visit with family. And then by my request, I wanted Europe. And so I got Germany, and I got deployed to, at the time, when I got there, I was First Armored Division. I was part of the 141st Signal Battalion, but we were the battalion that provided communications for First Armored Division, Old Ironsides. And at that time, when I got to Germany, they were at Bad Kreuznach, which was a wonderful installation, a small little post. Had 4 gates, and it was right in the middle of BK, right in the middle of town. The community loved us, and it was a lot of fun. We had my first sergeant was a PT stud, and I think he's the one that kind of influenced me into wanting to be extremely physically fit, fit to fight, as they say.
Yeah.
And that kind of got me into doing. I was really fit in the Army. I'm not now, obviously, but when I was in the Army, I was really fit, But what happened was it was within 6 months, the Army decided to give BK back to the locals, and moved First Armored Division to Wiesbaden Army Airfield, um, um, which Wiesbaden Army Airfield is close to Mainz and Wiesbaden, obviously. Um, and it sucked. You couldn't walk out of the post and into the town. You had to take a taxi cab. You know what I mean? You were more
Okay, so you were
isolated there.
still allowed off base, off post, but you
Yes,
couldn't walk. Okay.
correct. Yeah. And the locals were not anywhere near as friendly towards us. Not at all.
That was the question I was going to
Yeah.
have. So
Yeah.
they weren't happy you were there then.
Well, a lot of them were. A lot of them were, and a lot of them were not. Put it this way: I went into an ATM kiosk. There, if you kind of like they're in the bottom of a skyscraper, you walk in, they got multiple ATMs, and so it's, I don't know if you call it a kiosk or whatever, but anyhow, I went in and there was an elderly German gentleman there, and this was, dang, I forget what year it was, '02 maybe, something like that. And he was like, "Yeah, your 50 years of occupation, meaning the United States of my country, is almost over." And you would get hit like that. Most of the people we had to worry about, though, while stationed in Germany, were the Turks. Um,
Oh,
yeah, they really had it out for us, and they were not the type of people that you know would fight you 1-on-1 or even 2-on-1. No, they'd wait till they were 20-1 in their
oh,
favor, and they would jump you and mess you up. As a matter of fact, when I got back from my first deployment, one of my battle buddies, we were back less than a month. He got stabbed to death by Turks at a nightclub in Germany
oh,
after we did
geez.
15 months in Iraq. Yeah.
I am so sorry. That's
No, that
horrible.
it is. And it's all, you know, these guys were just extremely
I'd
angry at
say.
American soldiers for their own reasons. I never really spoke to them about what the main reason was, other than we were American. And I think their women wanted the American soldiers, so I
Mm.
really think, I'm not just saying that. I mean, that's kind of like what I heard through the grapevine back then in those days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's fair. Tell me about the cuisine. Did you get to eat the cultural food, what they ate there? Did you go out and eat any of that, or did you just eat at things?
Absolutely, all the time. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could take leave while you're stationed overseas and stuff. And so, for example, I was um, married with stepchildren at the time. Not my current wife, but a different lady. And we went around and went to Austria, we went to Switzerland, we went to Northern Italy to visit my family. We went to Six Flags over Belgium. I tried to get out and see the countryside as much as possible. But yeah, the
Did
food was always available. Sure.
did you have a favorite dish from Germany?
I think the best plate of food that I had in Germany was when I went to the Neuschwanstein Castle, the Disney World
Oh,
Castle
okay. Yeah, yeah.
in Bavaria. We went during the winter, so it was snow. It was absolutely gorgeous. Right, we took the horse sleigh ride up to the castle and so on and so forth.
Nice.
But we stopped at one of the restaurants right there on site, and I had the absolute best bratwurst with sauerkraut and just
That sounds delicious.
sauerkraut in Germany does not taste like any sauerkraut that I've ever had in the United States of America. Of course, I haven't lived up where most of the German people live, like in the
Right.
Northeast or Midwest or whatever it is. But anything you buy in a can or a jar here, it tastes like dirty
Yeah.
gym socks compared to the sauerkraut that they served in Germany. It was just phenomenal.
Yum. That actually sounds really good.
But the main thing I'll tell you, the main thing about Germany when it comes to food is they have a very wide variety of wonderful breads.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the bread market there it'll blow your mind. There's breads
Oh,
there that you probably never see anywhere else.
probably.
Yep.
How long were you stationed there?
I was stationed there for 3 years. Um, I redeployed back to the States when I got back from Iraq, my first deployment. So that would have been '04. No,
Okay,
excuse
so
me.
you went
Yeah,
you
that
went
would have been no.
Germany
Excuse
first?
me. So I was it wasn't 04. It was I got to when I left Germany, it was 05, and that's because I got there in 2000 uh, and then in 2001, of course, 9/11 happened. And then we were a year where we were pulling QRF, quick response force, mounted, dismounted patrols, gate guard at the base, at the post, excuse me, and gate guard at the housing areas. And so if we did that for 12 months while we were doing preparations for deployment. But anyhow, in April of 03, we deployed to Iraq. We were one of the, we went with First Armored Division. And I mean, outside of the Black Ops and Special Forces, we were one of the first units to go to OIF. Yeah, April
So
'03.
tell me a little bit about what may have been going through your head when you first landed in Iraq.
Freaking hot. It was hot. That was the hardest thing to get used to, was to get acclimated to the environment. Um, I had all of the insecurities and fears and concerns that you can imagine might go along with your very first time deploying to war. I wasn't too overly concerned because as a signal soldier, I didn't expect to really see too much. You know what I mean?
Right. Hmm.
But we were with First Armored Division, and we were the primary source of communication. So we had elements spread out all over Iraq. Starting from the presidential palace, which is the Forehead Palace in the Green Zone in Baghdad, to when we first got there, it was still called Saddam International Airport, but then it became BIOP, Baghdad International Airport. And then we have people spread out providing commos, southern Iraq, northern Iraq. They were pretty spread out.
What was it like for the civilians and the military there? Did you get to commingle as far as get to converse with them? Did you stay on post? How did that go for you?
Okay, well, when we first got there, we had no established supply routes. Okay, as a matter of fact, we GPSed our way up to Saddam International Airport.
Wow.
We had the day that we went north and crossed the berm into Iraq from Kuwait. I believe we were one of 7 different convoys with 100 plus vehicles per convoy. Now, if you were the first one or two, you could see pretty good. But if you were any further behind that, all you could see was hopefully the taillights of the vehicle in front of you, because you were kicking up
Yeah.
all this dust and all this sand. The sand out there is like powdered sugar, basically. You stomp your foot and it goes everywhere. So, there were a couple of instances where we had to stop because of, activity further ahead or whatever. But we finally made it. The thing is, though, when we got to our destination, we had half a dozen vehicles that didn't show up. And what happened to them was they couldn't see, so they started veering. And then they saw taillights and they got behind that vehicle. Well, they ended up 100 miles over this way, because they were behind the wrong vehicle.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. They're very lucky.
Yeah. I mean, it was all our vehicles, but different units, different missions. So
That's
yeah, getting our
funny.
soldiers back together was kind of a thing, but yeah, we did get to mingle with the locals. Once we were more established, and the people that did what they did to figure out who were the good guys and who were the bad guys, and they came up with the plan to have some of the locals maybe come onto the camp to do some manual labor, to maybe give them some money to kind of, do the PR thing. But yeah. And actually, me personally, I was a lot more involved with that than a signal soldier might have been, because my team got assigned to provide commos at the presidential palace. What a great, well, that would have been awesome. I mean, gold plated everything, marble, just name it,
Hmm.
just a beautiful, beautiful place. And then you got all these other soldiers from all these other NATO countries that are there, and you're mingling, you're talking, telling stories. It was a really good time. But as we were setting up the communications, my my section sergeant came to the green zone and pulled me from the team, saying that the Department of Defense decided not to give me a security clearance. So I was 2.5 years in at this point. It took them that long to decide not to give me a security clearance. Now, I was told it was over a $10,000 debt from a surgery that I had done, 10 years prior. And anyhow, whatever. But anyhow, because of that, I couldn't perform my duties as a signal soldier. So I got to do like convoy security. I was a battalion commander's driver. I pulled guard duty on some of the locals that we're talking about when they came onto the camp. I'd have to go pick them up at the gate, search them, clear them to come on, and then watch them the whole time. And then take them back to the gate to be released for the day and so on. So,
Wow. Okay. So you did get to mingle. Did you ever eat the local food?
yes, with these same guys that would come onto the camp and work, they broke bread with me one day. The thing that was uncomfortable for me was not so much that I was worried about poisoning the food or whatever, because, I wasn't, but was the fact that everybody eats with their hand. And I'm not
Yeah.
used to that. I'm not used to if I have a plate of food and I eat my food with my hand is one thing, but if I'm reaching into the same plate where everybody else is reaching in, I wasn't too keen on that.
Oh, goodness. Okay. How long were you stationed over there then in Iraq?
15 months. And
15 months.
yeah. So here, I'll say this, if I may.
Sure.
When 9/11 happened, at that time, a standard deployment for the Army was 6 months. Okay, standard deployment. Deploy for 6 months, come back home. Well, the people a lot smarter than I am, sitting behind a desk somewhere in Washington, D.C., decided that, we don't want to pay the soldiers the money that we have to pay them for each day that they're deployed over 6 months, if they're deployed so many days, whatever. I can't remember the specifics of it. But so they said, well, a regular deployment now is going to be 12 months.
Oh,
And
okay.
for every month that you're deployed over 12, you get an extra $1,000 a month. Okay, fine and dandy.
Okay.
We deployed to Iraq, 12 months. We're packed up. We got everything ready to redeploy back south to Kuwait to come back home. Well, they shut us down the night before we were supposed to get in our vehicles and head south. We were done. You know what I'm saying? We were like, we had washed our hands. We're good. We finished. Nope. Extended 90 days. And that's because it took 90 days to turn the mission over to the incoming unit. They didn't take that into consideration, I guess, initially.
Okay.
So for those 3 months, I got an extra $1,000 a month. Okay. Because it was any month over 12 months, you get an extra 1,000.
Yeah.
By the time we were done with that deployment, there's ghosts in here. By the time we were done with that deployment, they said, well, we're just going to make a standard deployment 15 months now.
Wow.
So the soldiers get screwed again, right? And now I said all of this because I think it's important to note that when I was going down there to pick up those locals to bring them onto the camp to do their chores for the day, I was talking to civilian gate guards there who were the lowest man on the totem pole of that particular contract. They were making $9,000 a month, and they were renegotiating the contract to get more money.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the lowest man on the totem pole. And they had like 20 of them out there working side by side with soldiers who were making $2,500 a month. And that's with all the extra pay we're getting. Ridiculous.
That's crazy.
It is. It is.
So you finished 15 months.
Yes.
And then you headed back stateside. Is that right?
Well, redeployed back to Germany.
Oh, okay.
And then because that's where I my first unit was Germany. I deployed with them to Iraq. Okay, the 141st. Then when I got back, everybody was on block leave. Now I was a signal soldier without a clearance. I couldn't perform my duties as a signal soldier. But instead of letting me reclass, you know what I mean, and then go to a unit and where I could perform the duties of that MOS, No, they PCS'd me, and this all happened because everybody was on block leave. They PCS'd me to another signal unit. Well, 10 days after I signed into that unit, they came down on orders. Well, stop loss, stop movement. So here again, I'm a signal soldier, can't perform my duties, but I can certainly prep for deployment. I can do all that stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, I got fortunate on this second deployment. We stayed in Kuwait. We didn't go north of Kuwait. And I was an I was an E5, and I got tasked with being the battalion's schools and training NCOIC, which is an E7 slot.
Oh, wow.
But the E7 that should have had that slot had issues. But he was so close to retirement, they were letting him have his issues. Like issues like he was getting black market hooch while we were deployed and getting drunk every night. You know what I mean? So that's why I had to.
Wow.
That's why I had to do the mission. So anyhow, I didn't. I didn't have to have my weapon with me everywhere I went. I wasn't carrying a full load. I was just, I'd go to battalion command center. I had to create the Excel spreadsheet and everything, and I wasn't just bringing soldiers from our unit. I was bringing soldiers from any unit in Iraq. So anyhow, by the time of that 12 months, and this deployment was only 12 months, but by the time that 12-month deployment was over, I can't remember the exact number, but 6,500 soldiers that I had transported down to Arif John from wherever they were. I had to go get them. I had to provide them safe passage. I had to get them scheduled into their classes, let them complete their classes, and I had to get them back. And I had 6,500, no casualties, no problems, none of that. And I created the spreadsheet. I did all of it as an E5.
Wow.
So I garnered a lot of respect from my command sergeant major, my battalion commander, and so on and so forth. Now, during that deployment, they knew that I was a signal soldier. They couldn't perform my duty as a signal soldier. So I wanted to become an Army firefighter. So, my battalion commander contacted the brigade commander, which was the 160th Brigade, Signal Brigade, pulled strings, and they gave me a school date, choice of duty station afterwards.
Wow.
Yeah, and they had to be all set up, and that made me feel good, you know what I mean? Because I was, respected for doing a good job and so on and so forth. But I messed all that up once I got back stateside because I didn't know that from the first deployment I was having issues. I didn't have time to process it because simple fact that I was focused on doing what I had to do while I was deployed. It was only once I got back stateside that I didn't have much of a mission that all the negative stuff started manifesting itself for me in my particular case, with everything that I had going on at that time.
Yeah. So you come back home. What happens next after? Well, let's go back just a little bit. So you went from Iraq to Kuwait.
Well, Iraq, yeah, back to the Western world. Signed into my new unit, and then it was like 5 months later I was back in the Middle East. But I stayed in Kuwait this time, except for when I had to travel to go, transport and provide security and so on.
So how different, in your opinion, was it from Kuwait versus Iraq?
The threat level was much lower. So again, instead of having to carry your weapon everywhere you went, wearing, full gear and all that stuff. You kept your weapon in the arms room. You signed it out. And depending on what the SOP was for that day, you either transported it with a round chambered or not. And, it was a lot more relaxed. And
what about Kuwait, the scenery?
It was shit all the way. It didn't matter where you went there. I don't understand why a modern man would decide to live in that environment. And I say that primarily because I experienced the sandstorm season in Kuwait. In Iraq, I never did, but in Kuwait, I experienced it. And I'm look, there wasn't one day that went by that I didn't ask myself, why would civilized man choose to live in this place? You know, I mean, because I mean, you can't see a foot in front of you.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's like sandpaper blasting you in the face, and whatever part's exposed, you get used to it. Do you get used to it? You have to. If you got to, you got to muddle through it. You got to muddle through it. But is it pleasant? Never.
Yeah.
And it raises a question. That has to have been happening for thousands of years, right?
Mhm.
Where the sand is blown south into whatever that ocean is there. Right? How can there still be sand left? It seems like all the sand would be gone, but it's still there.
That's an interesting question that somebody will ponder now tonight, I'm sure.
But I'll tell you this: that sand's only soft about that deep. After that, it's hard as concrete.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not. It's no joke. Like you know, uh, you're not going to bust into it real easy. We would whatever those machines are called that dig the trenches out so you can run conduit and wire and so on and so forth. We
Hmm.
were trying to set up the Camp Virginia is what it was called. We're trying to set it up in Kuwait, and of course you had to run power lines and so on and so forth. Those poor machines that are made for trenching so easily, right? Now those teeth were getting chewed up, they were breaking them and all that. So that's how hard that
Oh,
ground
wow.
is. You because you see it on TV and it looks like, hey, soft sand, you could dig all day like the beach. No.
Wow. When you come back stateside
Mm-hmm.
after leaving Kuwait, what happens from there?
Hmm. I started getting in a lot of trouble.
Mm.
Yeah, I didn't. I reverted back to drinking heavily, and at some point down the line, I started using drugs, cocaine, and I was this close to starting my firefighter school when I pissed hot, and
Okay.
yeah, my my chain of command. I'll tell you, and I'm not saying this slightly. They tried everything they could to keep me from getting in trouble. I tied their hands, especially when I pissed hot a second time.
Mm.
But even though I did that, they still respected me and loved me enough to put me out general under honorable. They did not put me out dishonorably. And I'm very happy for that because obviously I'm reaping the benefits of it today, with the VA and everything. Um, they even tried to help me. They sent me, to, I forget what the program is called, but anyhow, if you got a drug or alcohol problem, they send you there. But really, that wasn't my problem. The drugs and the alcohol were not my problem. I was having other problems.
They were
Um,
just a byproduct of,
the booze and the drugs
yeah,
were my way of ignoring my problems.
yeah.
And I floundered like that all the way up until 2015. I got out in '07. Okay.
Okay. Which that leads me to this next question then. So when you get discharged, um, did they provide you? I know you said that they were trying to get you into some of the rehabs that were
Mm-hmm.
available, but did they provide you with any other resources on transitioning back into civilian life to help make your life a little easier?
I mean, I went through the ACAP process, but it was so they don't you there's they don't really try to help the individual. Some things are classroom environment, and they just put out some general information, and there you go. You know what I mean? If you don't
Yeah.
ask the right questions, blah blah blah. Of course, I did the full physical when I got out and everything, but given everything that had happened, you would think that they would have had me talk to a therapist or a psychologist or somebody. I don't remember doing that. Maybe if I had, they would have recognized that I had the issues that I ended up having. Um, so when they put me out, basically I was just put out. Again, I'm not complaining because my unit respected me enough and respected what I have achieved, for the unit during deployment and everything, that they made it possible for me to get out general under honorable.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
you know, that's great. But no, they just kind of let me go. And I got in more and more trouble as time went on, all the way up until 2015. I had, problems with drugs and alcohol. Um, I mean, I would rent my car out for drugs. My car got used in a double homicide one time. The bodies were transported in the trunk of my car.
Oh,
I had to go to
goodness.
court as a witness many years later for that. Yeah. Yeah. I never got in trouble because the cops knew what was going on. They knew that I had a drug problem and they knew what I was, letting them use my car for so I could get the drugs. But yeah,
You're
not a
very
pleasant time
fortunate.
for me. Well, I'm
So,
fortunate
what
to be
was it?
alive.
Yeah. What was it that made you decide to turn a different corner?
In 2015, I got arrested and I got charged with some serious felonies, punishable by life felonies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Exaggerated charges, yes. Um, but basically, what I did is I put my hands on some dude, but before I got to him to put my hands on him, I had brought a weapon with me and I stashed it in the grass, military training in case I had to do a hasty retreat and I was receiving lead. I'd have had an opportunity. So, in my drunken stupor, that's the way I was thinking. But all I really ended up doing was punching the guy in the face 12, 15 times. And that resulted in, yeah,
That is.
but that
No.
resulted in 86 days in county jail facing life in prison. Okay. And
Hmm.
I got out of that because my mother found out that I was in jail and she took it upon herself I had given up. I had said, fuck it. Excuse my
Oh,
language.
you're fine. You're fine.
But I had given up. I said, well, this is it. I made my bed. I'm going to lie in it. I don't care. I'm not ever getting out of prison, though. I know that because either one thing or the other. So,
Right. Right.
um, so, but she got an attorney, and at the end of it all, everything got one charge got thrown out, or was non-adjudicated, which basically the same thing, thrown out, and then the two felonies were reduced to misdemeanors, which were more in line with what I actually did. Okay.
Fair. That's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
Um, so at that point, then you decide, okay, I need to get my poop in a group, or how
Basically,
did it go
yeah.
for you?
So during that 86 days in county, I, just to get out of the cell block, I would go to different events, Bible study, AA meeting, blah, 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 whatever. And it was during an AA meeting that the lady that was running the show there that day, she's talking about positive thinking, about yourself. Some reason it stuck. And when I got back to the cell block, I was like, when I get out of here, I'm not going to do any more drugs. I'm only going to drink. And then I said, well, that's not positive enough. I said, when I get out of here, I'm not going to do any drugs and I'm not going to drink. And I said, well, that's still not positive. And finally, I worked my way all the way down to I don't do drugs and I don't drink. You know what I mean? I cut out all
Hmm.
the gray area.
Right.
And I was able to do that for 5 years straight. Now, when I first got out, one of the stipulations that the court put in front of me was that I had to do an in-house treatment program because I was drunk when it happened. When I got arrested. So I could have done a 28-day program, but I chose a 9-month-long men-only faith-based program because I knew in my heart that I wasn't going to drink or do drugs anymore. At that time, that's what I felt in my heart. Okay, I was more focused on building my relationship with Christ, and I did that for 11 months. Actually, I stayed there 11 months, but I think it worked for me because when I was going through that turmoil where I was beating that guy up and everything that I was involved in at that time, I was in the middle of a storm, and I think God calmed the storm by putting me in jail. And then it was while I was in jail that I did the reflecting and everything, and decided that I was going to live differently and try to do better. But the problem is that I still had this PTSD.
Right.
And so initially, things were great. I was focused. I was, responsible. I was doing everything that needed to go. My life was going well. But the longer I stayed sober, the more of these demons, if you will, that I was subduing with the alcohol and the drugs started coming forward. And so the craziness started happening again. And that was about that time that I found an establishment called the Vet Center. And if nobody knows about it, it's loosely affiliated with the VA, but it's free therapy
Nice.
for veterans. And it's run by veterans. The therapists, for the most part, are veterans. And so it made it easy for me to go talk to them because, it was somebody that had walked the walk, talked the talk. And in my case, my veteran ended up being, former Green Beret Special Forces, saw 20, who knows what he saw compared to me, you know what I mean? That gave me my
Yep.
issues, you know what I mean? But he worked with me, and he got me to the point where we got through all the military stuff, and he brought me all the way back to my early childhood because I was beaten when I left. I didn't mention this earlier, but when I left Italy, when I was in Italy, I was staying with my mother and the babysitter, and I had all my aunts and uncles and cousins and so on. When I left Italy at the age of 10, I moved in with my father, who had his own issues, and he would come home from work and push me around, beat me up, and all that kind of stuff. So I went through all that too, but my therapist helped me work through all of that and brought me all the way back. And he's gotten me to a point where I'm at now where, is it perfect? Nope. I still seclude, I still loathe leaving the house, and so on and so forth. But I get along better with my family. I'm calmer, and I'm able to, every time I leave the house, what people out there see is not really me. It's my forced behavior to be, hey,
Right.
jolly happy guy, right? But when I get back home, I have to I breathe a sigh of relief because it's tiring. It's
Yeah.
mentally tiring and it's physically tiring.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about um, getting your VA benefits for this, for your PTSD and such, and what kind of struggles, if any, did you have?
Plenty. I started out right when I left the military. When I ACAP, they gave me 10%, and it was I thought for my legs, but it was actually for my hearing. Um, and then at some point, I don't, I forget more than I remember, but at some point I got to 30%. And it was my therapist actually at the vet center that put me in contact with our friend, Will Simmons.
Okay.
And Will was my attorney, and he helped get me, to 100% permanent total disabled, which is where I should have been a long time ago, quite frankly. But when it came to the PTSD itself, in 2013, I was diagnosed with PTSD by a psychiatrist. But the VA wasn't happy with that. So they sent me to, I don't know, half a dozen more psychologists to be reevaluated. And the first, so many of them said I had PTSD, but when they came across the one that said I had bipolar disorder, they said, he doesn't have PTSD. He's got bipolar disorder. But excuse me, I got to backtrack a second, because originally when I was diagnosed with PTSD, they didn't service connect me. They claimed they
Wow.
couldn't see they couldn't see where I ever deployed, which makes no sense
Uh,
because it's right on my DD 214, right?
right.
Yeah, so it was possibly some jerk off, unhappy with his life, working for the VA, that was just ignoring the facts in front of him and said nope, which happens to a lot of vets.
That's terrible.
Yeah, but anyhow, at the end of it, Will and his wonderful team, because everybody there is so wonderful. I'm telling you, I mean, there's a lot of love and a lot of respect in this house for him and his team. But they got me there, and they got me the back pay and everything, and so all that is settled now. I'd give it all back though if I didn't have to deal with the anxiety and all the crap that goes through my mind and all the trouble that I've endured, self-inflicted, obviously, but because of.
Right. What other resources in your area are you aware of for veterans?
Well, we have a VA clinic at Eglin Air Force Base, which from where I am is about 20 miles away. We have a rather large VA hospital, about 40 miles away. And we're in Florida. So the state of Florida also has veterans benefits. I haven't researched them to be able to give you any details on that.
That's okay.
But I know that they have, for example, once I was awarded my 100%, so I got free fresh and saltwater fishing license for the state of Florida. I can go to any state park in the state of Florida for free. I only pay a service fee for my license plate for one of my vehicles. I can get a disabled veteran plate for all my vehicles, but I only get the break on one of them. So typically you want the most expensive one and get the break on that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's.
Let me go ahead. So for any of you watching or listening, if you have some questions for Lorenzo, go ahead and put those out there for me now. I wanted to say, so Jason says, Lorenzo, thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you, Jason.
And G23 Reviews, he wanted to know, where is one place that you were stationed that you'd like to return to for a month if you could?
Bad Kreuznach. Unfortunately, it's no longer there. It's, we returned it to the locals. I had to tell you, that was my first duty station. And the experience, if I could have had that experience, or if I imagine that if any soldier or military personnel could have that experience that I had, they would probably do 40 years in the military if they could have that kind of stuff going on around. It was just that pleasant, super friendly. You couldn't walk out the gate and walk past 5 houses without anybody who was standing outside saying hello, whether it was good morning, good afternoon, inviting you in for cake and coffee. I mean, you could feel the love for us soldiers was palpable. Matter of fact, the day that we had the ceremony, the handing over ceremony to the locals, I saw more locals crying because we were leaving.
Oh,
yeah, it was just it was a very emotional moment, really, honestly. We were very loved and appreciated in that particular community. Stark contrast to Wiesbaden Army Airfield. Wiesbaden, you walk down the street, you might get pepper sprayed just for being American.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was terrible.
So if you had just in a short few words, couple of sentences, what would be your words of wisdom for anybody who's looking to join the military? What kind of words of wisdom do you have for them?
Do your research about the particular branch that you're interested in. Again, prime example would be, if I'd known that there were 250 jobs available instead of being the meathead I wouldn't have picked from a short list of like 25. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Probably would have done something different, something that I enjoyed, and it might have worked out better for me in the long run. I hear say that if you enjoy what you're doing, you don't work a day in your life. Well, for me, it was waking up with contempt for what I had to do every day, because I really hated Signal. It was terrible. It wasn't for me. It's probably a wonderful MOS for techie guys, but for me, no.
So CLF-89J, first of all, thank you, welcome. And they say, thank you for your service. I loved hearing your story.
Thank you very much. It means a lot. It's an honor to be able to be invited to a podcast like this one and share my humble story. I'm sure I'm not the only veteran who struggles with feelings of uselessness and so on and so forth as we go through daily lives and stuff, because, I'm used to having been able to do so much, and now I'm so
Yeah.
limited. And a lot of times, I question my usefulness anymore.
Yeah, that's a difficult thing, I would think, mentally, right? That goes hand in hand with, the PTSD, where you're thinking a lot of, like you said, of usefulness and what you can offer in society. And I think it's more of that, of reckoning that, or recognizing that you have offered so much already. And, now as a veteran, it's time for us to recognize you and give you what you need to be able to heal.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and I live in a military community. I mean, we've got 4 military installations within 80 miles of me, 90 miles of me. More, I think, actually, if I stop and think about it, because one, two, three, there's three just within 20 miles of me.
Oh, wow.
To include, Army Special Forces and the Air Force, but we got Navy here. We got everything, active installations, meaning I'm in the panhandle of Florida. So it's a very, um, you know, um, military veteran heavy community. So when you leave the house here and you go there, pretty much there's places that don't offer, a military discount, but it's not uncommon for somebody to find out that you were in the military and thank you for your service. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of respect for that around you. And most times it's veterans saying that to other veterans, but sometimes it's somebody who's never been in the military, but they just
Yep.
appreciate the fact that you served your country.
Yeah. That's
And
exactly right.
that being said, I think it's important to note that as veterans, um, and I speak for myself, but as veterans, I feel like we should all be grateful for the people who were not in the military and were here in our beloved country while we were deployed, keeping this country running so that we had something familiar to come back to. You know, uh,
Wow.
it's the one hand washing the other type thing.
Well,
As a veteran, I did what I did, but
those are great words. So Jason says, nothing humble about your story, sir. We all owe our freedom to your service. Also, please thank your wife for her sacrifices as well.
very
G,
important. Yeah.
yes. G23 says, we definitely appreciate everyone who's willing to put on the uniform and knowing they might not get to return home. We thank you all and God bless.
Thank you.
Um, So I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for taking the time to come out, tell your story. And for
That
anybody
that
else,
that close to missing it, that close to changing my mind, guys. Just so you know, it's but
it was a
honestly,
mental game.
yeah, I'm glad I'm here now. I'm glad that we did this. You and I have spoken offline,
We
and
have.
stuff, and you're pleasant to talk to, and you make this
Thank you.
very easy even for somebody like me. So it's wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you. So if you want to hold tight for me for just a few, I'm going to go ahead and get this wrapped up on my end. But
Okay.
um, a huge thank you to everybody who came out tonight in the chats, etc. Um, oh, and CLF says, great job, Lorenzo. Your family loves you.
Hey, it's all about America, man. Let's make America great.
um, So, for those of you who haven't, we really need the subscribers. So, if you haven't, please go out, hit the subscribe button. At the end of this, give me a thumbs up that you like the conversation. Hit that notification bell so that you can get more conversations and get notified of that as well. We want to honor our veterans and have those conversations and have them recorded for future individuals. And so anything you can do for that, please go ahead and give us the subscribers and the thumbs up. So much appreciated. I do have a guest scheduled for next week, so I'm really excited for that. So y'all be sure to join me next week, 6 p.m. Central Time. And everybody, please keep warm, and hopefully we get done with any of the power outages that I know are going on kind of north of where I'm at too. So everybody, please have a wonderful and safe rest of your week.